This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And we are finally here. Last day of the NBA regular season. That means we are in play-in mode, which then will lead us to playoff mode. So now it gets really interesting. But let it not be said, and applause to the NBA. They're making us work, man. And the Western Conference, they made us work, right? They took literally the last day of the NBA regular season for us to get in totality the play-in seeds and the playoff seeds to be finalized for us to finally get into our conversations. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Shaw? Shake them dice, baby.
Hey, man.
We ready for snake eyes now. Let's go.
I'm bringing back that old meme, Birdman, rubbing my hands together, brother. Like it's that time. It's that time. It's been a lot of long months, a lot of long sledging through some of the drugs of the NBA season, but we are here. The play-in and the playoffs are upon us. The baseline is here, rocking and rolling. We've been on a hot streak ourselves too. We're playing our best basketball. We're podcasting our best podcast right now as the playoffs come into it, man. We're peaking at the right time, brother, and I'm excited, fam.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And again, we don't get to this point without our fans and our listeners, without our peoples, man. So again, we want to make sure that we give the proper shout outs and we give our flowers to those of you who've been rocking with us from day one, right? Not just day one of when we first started doing this, but day one of but also day one of the regular season, because it's led to this, right? Whether you are a novice, whether you're a true fan, or whether you're an NBA pundit, we are at a place where we all now can come together and all eyes are fixated on who is destined to actually get to the NBA Finals. And the path starts right now. So as always, we like to make sure that you're tapped in with us. And if it's your first time, you know where to find us. We got to do the plugs. Be sure to get my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA or get at me at Game Face Leader. Show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. If you love listening to what we like to do, or you're interested in what we do, please go to www.thebaselinenba.com, where you can not only check this episode out, but also the archive of great episodes. And we have been, man, digging in our crates. We've been in our bag for a few months. So definitely check out some of the great episodes that we have dropped more recently and the shows that we are planning to drop for your listening pleasure. If you're seeing this on the YouTube channel, we'd like to say hello to you and yours. And if you see the blue and white logo, it's usually down in the right-hand corner. Let's letting you know that is the 19 Media Group family. Baseline 19 Media Group family be running these content streets. Not only do we have great podcast content for the basketball listening ear, but also we cover it all with 19 Media Group, sports, entertainment, music, culture, you name it, we got it. Be sure to check out our family of content creators who do great work at www.19mediagroup.com. So with that being said, let's get right into the digs of it. It is play-in time, right? So over the next couple of days, the play-in tournament will then finally round out what should be in totality the playoff situation that's going to take place for the East and Western conferences, respectively. Shaw, will start off with the Western Conference play-in situation. The number 10 Dallas Mavericks. And I can't believe I'm saying this because it wasn't but a couple of weeks ago I was saying how the Phoenix Suns was going to backdoor their way into this play-in situation. Somehow they backdoored their way out of the play-in situation. And the Dallas Mavericks said, excuse me, let me go ahead and do what it needs to do. Dallas Mavericks now have to travel to Sacramento. Sacramento has been a very heady team in the second half of the year, especially since Doug Christie has taken over. What are our expectations for this particular matchup? And is it really predicated on the coming out party for Anthony Davis to take the reins and figure out a way to get them past a pretty decently competitive Sacramento's team?
Yeah, I'm going to pick up right there, right? I think Dallas's only shot really in this is a historically type game from Anthony Davis. And don't know if he's capable of delivering that right now with his history, his injury, coming back from what he's been able to come back from. He hasn't looked amazing since he's been back. He's been impactful. I think is winning. He even hit a game winner, since his return, but he would have to carry so much on his shoulders on the road against a Sacramento team that has a lot of offensive firepower, and they don't rely necessarily on getting to the rim where he's going to be doing the most of his damage, doing a lot of rim protection. DeRozan with that midi, Zach LaVine kind of attacking at all three levels, and Sabonis, yes, on the glass doing some offensive rebounding and things of that nature, but also doing a little bit of the mid-range jump shooting as well. It will take a lot for the Dallas Mavericks, I think, to pull this off. Contributions from Najee Marshall and Spencer Dinwiddie and the like. They'll all have to have really plus games, but Sacramento's been a little Jekyll and Hyde, as we know, so I guess we can't put anything past them to maybe kind of give it away. But this should be a game Sacramento ultimately wins when all is said and done.
I wish that this was the game that I would be like, man, I would love to see Klay Thompson come out and do some things. But that's just not happening, right? I think more than ever, when you've got that kind of championship, how do you say, cachet, right? In an Anthony Davis, in a Klay Thompson, and whatever other veterans that are there, I wish Jason Kidd could have the confidence to say, I don't want to just only put it on Anthony Davis's shoulder. But with that being said, Shaw, I think the only way that the Dallas Mavericks win this game is they have to make this about as ugly a basketball game as you could possibly imagine. They're going to have to be physical. And it's not that they don't have the capabilities to do that, because when you really look at the Sacramento Kings, and no disrespect to the Sacramento Kings, because from a talent perspective, they, to me, are the better team. But they can also get muddled up, right? They're to me, too much of a finesse team. I think you need to have a level of physicality that will allow you to be able to open up the floor the way that it's necessary. I don't know if maybe Doug Christie can be that guy, can influence that, but I think the starter for that to me is Domantas Sabonis. He has to make a statement. He's got to get physical with Anthony Davis. He's got to make Anthony Davis look like he is not 100% and essentially compromise at his role or his position. But if the Dallas Mavericks figure out a way to be physical with the Sacramento Kings, they may actually have a chance. But they cannot allow this to be an up and down game. They can't allow this to be a game where Zach LaVine and company just get off their shot the way that they want to and just shoot and jack shots up, get anything that they want. The Dallas Mavericks have to figure out a way to be physical from not just the defensive side of the ball, but also slow down the Sacramento Kings to give themselves a chance.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up great points, right? So this is why they brought Max Christie in. Like, he's not just a bystander; he's there to try to play defense. So if you get the combination of Christie, PJ Washington, and AD kind of going out there switching defenders and trying to muck things up, maybe you can slow the pace down enough. I just think Sacramento has so much firepower. Didn't even talk about Malik Monk and what he brings to the table on a regular basis, especially in big game situations. Like, he's been able to perform in playoff situations, previous to this as well too. So it really is a classic case of supreme level offense. Sacramento Kings were like eighth offensively, in the defense that the Dallas Mavericks are trying to curate now, obviously bolstered by Anthony Davis. Jason Kidd is going to have to scheme the hell out of this from a defensive side standpoint to slow down Sacramento's high potent offense and Sacramento's ability to rebound, especially with Sabonis in the middle. And remember, they also added Valanciunas, for that size. While we don't see a lot of Valanciunas and Sabonis minutes together, they will always have somebody who's big and or rebound capable on the floor now with Valanciunas in tow too. So that's why I'm leaning heavily towards Sacramento. And I still think it's better for Dallas's long-term future to enter the lottery anyway, and not say that they're tanking, because they clearly are not. But I hope we see a lot of pride out of Anthony Davis.
The Phoenix Suns figured out a way to mess that up. So
you gonna keep kicking, digging on the grave, but they're gone, brother. We don't need to talk about them. We gonna talk about them in our top report. We don't need them to be here, bro.
Maybe I'm just a little antsy about my autopsy. I didn't bury him enough.
I see you itching, but like what I'm saying is, like, I'd love to see a vintage performance from Anthony Davis. I think that would also give the Mavs faithful some hope. And it's like, all right, well, look what this guy could potentially do. And if they get that and it ends in a win, great. But if it comes in a loss, the lottery isn't the worst thing in the world, I think, for them and for this rest of this team to get some rest and try to get healthy for what next season. Because even if they get in, they're not making a long run here no matter what.
All right. So to me, it sounds like your prediction is Sacramento will wind up winning that first play-in game, which then means that they would essentially wind up playing the loser of the 7-8 matchup, right? So we'll get into that in a moment, right? As far as our predictions go. But now we can focus our attention to the 7-8 situation. And the Golden State Warriors had an opportunity to not be in this play-in situation. They unfortunately lost their last regular season game, and it took an overtime victory. So it's kind of a double whammy, right? When we're talking about what took place for the Golden State Warriors. One of the things that really concerns me is the fact that if you ask the Golden State Warriors, the team that you do not want to play against is ultimately the Memphis Grizzlies, right? And it's not because the Memphis Grizzlies are not a team from a matchup perspective that they can go and do what the Warriors have been able to do since they've gotten Jimmy Butler. It's just that the Memphis Grizzlies seem to be always in the Golden State Warriors way. In anything that they try to do, anything they're trying to achieve, relitigate the dynastic days of the Golden State Warriors. Who's up there to upset the apple cart? The Memphis Grizzlies. And now that you have a healthy, or should be a healthy, Ja Morant, you're going to make this road for the Golden State Warriors. You're going to make them work for it, And I'm just more interested on what is it going to take? Because now we have two very different storylines when we talk about the Golden State Warriors. Do we want this to be about the Jimmy Butler, playoff Jimmy Butler, or do we want this about this, 2014 to 2018, Steph Curry-esque type situation? I don't think two can function at the same time for the Golden State Warriors, for them to do what's necessary, especially in this series against the Memphis Grizzlies. And I'm presuming that they're going to prevent one or the other from thriving like that in this type of matchup.
Yeah, Memphis has a lot of size and they have a lot of players that they can throw at this. But remember, they're also in a situation with another kind of rookie head coach, if you will, going into his first playoffs. And I don't think that can be underestimated, especially on the road, in the play-in situation. So while the Grizzlies theoretically will have two chances at it, and be able to potentially save face if they were to lose, it's a hard ask, I think, to go against the generational talent of Stephen Curry and what is also we know as playoff Jimmy Butler, in this situation. But again, the Grizzlies have the horses. They have the defensive capability to make a game tough for Golden State. I just think it's a matter of the veteran presence that Golden State has. We saw Jimmy Butler play like that guy, like that Heat guy we saw him play in game 82 versus the Clippers, that ultimately end up in an overtime loss that sent them into the play-in anyway. But there were waves of Jimmy playing that way. But what is not known at this time of our recording is how bad he banged knees with Kawhi towards the end of that game, and how bad is that going to be? Is that going to limit him, when the play-in comes against the Memphis Grizzlies too? So those are a couple big stories to kind of watch in this situation. But I think this is going to be a really fun matchup, and it's probably my favorite matchup of all the play-ins that we have so far in the first round.
Give me your X Factor player. My X Factor player that I think people are not going to be talking about, but I think will have a very, very big impact on the momentum of this particular game, Desmond Bane. I think if Desmond Bane finds his shot and Ja Morant doesn't have to lean heavily in being the aggressive Ja Morant, and I'm not saying that Ja Morant can't take over a game. As a matter of fact, I would love to see him go out there and take over a game, because it'll be interesting to see how Steve Kerr will throw out whatever bodies he can to find the best matchup possible. I often sometimes think that Steve Kerr does not do enough from the defensive side of things in order to produce the best matchup possible to give the Warriors a chance, because he leans so heavily on what kind of offensive weapons they have at their disposal. But you've got Moses Moody. You've got Gary Payton Jr. You've got a bunch of guys. I think you have to be very strict and diligent in who you deploy and who you expend your resources on. Because if you tend to put the least best matchup that Desmond Bane can get off on, I think he's the backbreaker for the Golden State Warriors. I think he has he has just the right combination of physical strength and also shot making ability that can counter the idea that you're only going to be fixated on Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. and what he does. And don't let me get started about the Jaren Jackson Jr. thing. I think that he could be the Achilles heel for the Memphis Grizzlies if he's going to do is camp out there and shoot damn 3-point shots and not become some kind of a presence in the post. I'm not saying he's got to take shots, but he has got to rebound the basketball. And you've seen him over the last couple of weeks, Shaw. He has just been hanging around the 3-point line. And that is just inexcusable now, especially in a situation where the Golden State Warriors will gift you the ability to be a dominant presence down there in the blocks if the only person you're going to worry about is Draymond Green being on.
I mean, I think to a lesser degree, it's that's maybe understanding slightly like Draymond Green is something to worry about, on the blocks, and that will be.
But what I'm saying is Jaren Jackson has got to inject himself in the fray and force Draymond to overplay and be over aggressive. If all Draymond's going to do is sit there and watch Jaren Jackson Jr. shoot 3-point shots, he can be so much more of a menace to everyone else out there because Jaren is not putting himself in the position that allows his height and his size to be a.
Here's the thing. I don't think that Jaren can stand Draymond up in the post. And what's worse though is that when Jaren doesn't do a lot of straight post ups. But he does do some ball fake and 2 dribbles, try to slither into the paint. And he's a little awkward, like the finishes look weird. And I think that could be problematic against Draymond as well, too. Like, I don't really love the Jaren Jackson Draymond situation for Memphis at all, because I think Jaren can very easily be taken out of the series, but offensively. But where he can help is if he is getting offensive rebounds, which he doesn't typically do, but also being a plus defender, which we know he can be on the other side of the basketball. If he can be that rim deterrent and not jump on Jimmy Butler's ball fakes as he's coming and slashing into the lane, that's where he can have a significant impact in this one game scenario against a very, very tough veteran Golden State roster. I agree with you. I think Jaren Jackson, for me, is the X factor in terms of what he's able to do on both sides of the basketball. Does he get baited, into drives and getting stripped and getting the ball slapped off his knee or getting stood up in the post, against Draymond? Or again, does he end up having a hot shooting game because those options are not attractive and he ends up camping out, as you're alluding to, and then maybe his shot is on that night and it's starting to work. And then Draymond now has to vacate the paint because he's got to go out there and respect that. Those are all things that I'm really interested to see kind of in this first round. Again, especially with the rookie head coach kind of in play, John Morant, still battling some nagging injuries, but they do have some other guys, and for me, the Memphis Grizzlies have the most amount of like kind of quote, air quote, random guys who could get hot and be like, oh, where did that come from? Like it could be Scottie Pippen Jr., it could be Santi Aldama or whatever the case may be. Like, I can't believe we lost because those guys got hot, but they've all have done that throughout the course of the season. Whereas Golden State, it's driven by what Curry does and what Butler does, period, the end.
Do you think it was concerning to see Steve Kerr not even play Jonathan Kuminga in that game?
Why are you throwing that alley-oop for me, brother?
I'm just saying, would we be remiss not bringing that up? And I'm saying maybe you're probably saying, please, Cal, don't bring that up because you know what I'm gonna do. You know what I'm saying? But listen, we got to do it. So.
I myself was surprised he didn't play in that matchup against the Clippers. Like that was a little strange, but they're also saying that it hasn't been working. I think in a 1-game scenario, we will probably see Kuminga. I can't imagine that he benches him Jason Tatum style, in the Olympics here and just says, you know what, no, I'm not going to go to this, especially with the way Memphis can kind of throw different size and types of players at them throughout the course of a 48-minute game. I think Kuminga will get some minutes in that situation, especially if Butler is hobbled in any way. But I don't know how much of an impact he'll have, in that 1-game scenario.
I'm going to say this, Shaw, and listen, I completely, actually, I feel you were being very light on the situation. I think you probably have more that you really want to say, but maybe you're just reserving yourself for.
I don't want to beat a dead horse.
But I'm going to say this. I think it is concerning to see that in a situation where you had an opportunity, and I'm putting this on Steve Kerr, as much as I respect and I love Steve Kerr as a head coach, and he has done so much, he's revered, he's up there, right? This is sometimes the thing that drives me nuts about him. This is a 1-game situation that you have an opportunity to not have to play an extra 1 or 2 basketball games in a playoff run, right? And you can clearly see that some things are not working, right? I don't care. You empty out the tank. You've got available bodies. You use that opportunity where you can and whenever possible. I understand that you're trying to stay within the white line, so to speak, on how you're doing it. But there is an able-bodied player who is produced for you, right? And you have not figured out a way to get him out there, that's on you. Because now what you've done is you've actually hindered his confidence. You're just going to throw him out there in a situation because you think it's the Memphis Grizzlies. Sometimes it just doesn't work like that, Sean. Again, when I see things like that, it irks me because it's not so much about the player, but it's about how you're utilizing the player. And in this situation, there was an opportunity in that game against the Clippers. I don't even care if it was only but a minute or 2 minutes. You get him out there because you know you need something to put yourself in any position possible to not have to lose that game in which they wound up losing it, and now they're in the play-in situation.
I'm gonna listen. We got to move on, but I agree with you. I think you made an excellent point in the aspect of Kuminga's confidence now going into what is a playoff basically scenario for them. He's going in there with the lowest amount of confidence. They played 53 minutes, right? They went into overtime, and he didn't sniff not even 1 minute of that. And I think that's where that's going to come back to potentially bite them, in the proverbial. But I will say this last thing though. I don't know how much long for this roster or this rotation minutes his Buddy Hield, because he has been god awful. We've seen Kerr even talking to him about some of the decisions he's made. Seen Curry talking to Hield about some of the decisions he's made. Hield might be the guy who gets no minutes, in that playing game against Memphis, and maybe Kuminga can take those minutes from there.
It'll be interesting to see. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we will focus our attention to the Eastern Conference play-in situation. Got some nice matchups happening. You don't want to miss it here on the Baseline. We are back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Time to focus our attention now to the Eastern Conference play-in situation. We have the 10-seeded Miami Heat and the 9-seeded Chicago Bulls. Both teams under 500 basketball struggled down the stretch. And as much as it was the rest of the other teams were just that bad that it just basically left them as the last two standing for the play-in situation. You got to wonder, though, when you look at this matchup, Shaw, is it a matter of rooting for less to get more or getting more out of what has been much less in this particular matchup? I don't know where to go with this.
It has a lot to be desired, but I think at this point, the Bulls and the Hawks and the Heat, I guess, to another degree. Again, they are playing veterans. I think at this stage, like the Eastern Conference tournament can be named after them in some sort of form or fashion. Bulls end up with home court advantage in this situation, so that's not something that they've often had, when it comes to the play-in conversation. And they are going against a Heat team that I wouldn't say has figured it out, but they've played better than obviously the 10-game losing streak that I was bearing them, roughly 2.5 weeks ago. They ended up winning, I think, 7 out of their last 10, or maybe 6 out of their last 10, just a little bit over 500. And they have somewhat more of an identity. I was on SiriusXM recently talking about this Heat team specifically, and I trust Eric Spoelstra in a 1-game scenario. And I think that's really the difference maker here too. I think the talent holistically is even. Miami has traditionally, I don't know, they're not always great when they have like kind of this flat delineation, like Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, Andrew Wiggins. Like there's, I guess, who really is the alpha, and you don't really know who's going to take the reins of a situation from there. But that's where I think they can rely on their defensive principles and obviously the scheming of Spoelstra to potentially get them through a matchup with a Chicago Bulls team that they didn't expect themselves to be here as well too, despite the excellent play of Kobe White, Bucelis, and Giddey. I think more specifically, on the latter stretch of this game. But I think it's going to be a fun one. I don't think this is going to be a blowout in any way. Heat on the road, they don't usually have to deal with that part of the situation. So Chicago has a lot going for them, but again, Spoelstra versus Donovan, I lead Spo in that most days out of 100 times out of 100.
Look, the Bulls have beaten the Heat the last 2 games,
Yep.
and all have been within the last month, right? Literally. I think if we're talking about revisionist history, who want to revise this history like right now? For if you're the Miami Heat, this is a great opportunity for you to right the wrongs. And in actuality, look, the Bulls took 3 or 4 in this series of them. So here's my thing. I think the better well-rounded team is the Chicago Bulls, the team that to me has the better opportunity where the coming out party needs to happen is with the Miami Heat. This needs to be Tyler Hero's coming out party, bro. Like seriously, like I think we've waited way, way, way too long. Like I know what you're getting with Bam Adebayo. You already know what you're getting.
Sure.
I think this is an opportunity, to your point about how Eric Spoelstra manipulates this roster to get them over, quote unquote, the proverbial hump, right? You do what's necessary, put yourself in that position. All you want to do is give yourself a chance. Who none better to roll the dice than you have with Eric Spoelstra? It's kind of tough because Billy Donovan is a heady guy, and you're winning. You're like, man, I would love to see Billy Donovan actually win on the side of this, right? Like he's still that dude, so to speak, right? My whole thing, though, again, Tyler Hero's got to be that dude. He has the opportunity here for him to say, this is my team. This is where all of the hoopla and everything that happened all the way going back to the trade deadline with the Jimmy Butler thing or whatever the case may be. You've maligned me going back from almost a year and a half, 2 years now, not giving me the respect I deserve. If there's ever a time now where he has that opportunity for him to put himself in the hat to say, I deserve the same kind of respect that you're going to start giving all of these other quote unquote potential stars in the game. This needs to happen, because if you're the Miami Heat is going to be a good team, no doubt. And you're going to have Eric Spoelstra, but you need a star. You need a guy to come in and just take over, like literally.
Well, so I think it's interesting because that was kind of my point with Miami, where like I know you're looking for it to be Hero, but I think it can be Hero. It could be Bam. And in theory, it could be Andrew Wiggins. Wow, that sounds crazy, but Wiggins has played really good basketball. He's been kind of a 1A for them since coming over there, since in the Jimmy Butler deal. He's had a couple 40-point, games and has really looked like, hey, I can shoulder the load, I think, at times. I think if you're looking at the two rosters, and if you were closing your eyes, or even for the beginning of the season, right, who's more likely to have a bad game in a situation like this with the lead guy, and Kobe White or Tyler Hero? And I think most people would say Kobe White probably might shrink in that scenario. The difference is if Tyler Hero were to shrink, Bam and Wiggins are still there, I think, offensively. I don't think most people are looking at the Bulls saying it's like, all right, well, Vucevic is going to lead them to a win, or Baselis is, or Giddey is offensively. They don't really have somebody that you trust like that offensively, especially Vooch being guarded by Bam on the other side of the basketball. That's where it's just like, wow, in a one-game scenario, as far as bad as Miami has played, I would have to lean towards them a little bit, because I think they have more bites at the apple to be successful offensively. Even if one guy was off, I trust the other guys in essence to be able to get that. And where the Bulls, while they've played some sneakily good defense, I don't believe they're wraps. Like, I don't believe that this is a good, solid defensive team right now. So that's where I land on it. As much as I'd love to believe in Chicago and the great vibes that they've created since the Zach LaVine train, I'm just a little bit dubious on their ability to do this, even with home court advantage.
Yeah, look, this is the type of game where if the Chicago Bulls buys into their total team effort, they have enough able bodies that can actually fill up the scoreboard. I think where, to your point, this comes down to discipline. This comes down to who gets in whose roster's ear more, to do not create those self-inflicted wounds that will hurt you, because neither team exhibit the level of whatever mistakes I make can easily be made up for it. I have enough great players. Now, again, this is the opportunity for some guys to kind of have their moment in the sun. But I think if it's going to be maligned by just bad basketball, crazy turnovers, sloppy play, then you're going to lean on your head coaches to figure out a way to get you through this, that normally you would actually lean on the talent that you have on your roster to help you get you through this. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Let's go ahead and focus on the other play-in matchup. The Orlando Magic will be taking on the Atlanta Hawks. Hawks traveling to Orlando in that 7-8 matchup. I really wish, man, the Orlando Magic was just fully healthy. I felt like, man, this was their year for them to be a dangerous team. And they are. Let's not get it twisted. I do think that a lot of people might lean to the idea that the Atlanta Hawks have as good a chance as any. And maybe this might actually be a bad matchup for the Magic. But I think from a defensive perspective, the Orlando Magic has the bodies, and they also have the talent to not just stop, but also box the Atlanta Hawks. What do you think about this particular matchup, Shaw? I find it as intriguing because I don't think people are truly respecting the potential that you get with the Paolo Banchero and Wagner combination. Listen, I'm there for it to see them possibly play either the Cavaliers or to take on the Celtics. this could be a great opportunity for them to do so. I'm sure they don't want to play the Cavaliers though a second year around. So
Yeah, I mean, with their defense, no matter with all the injuries they've had, they still managed to have a top 2 defense this year. Like that is something to really hang your hat on. Conversely, they're 27th offensively. And so while it hasn't been sexy on that side of the basketball, Banchero and Wagner have been playing pretty good basketball, for the latter part of the last 15, 20 games. Orlando's really kind of turned things around. And, they've salvaged what was looking like a really, really poor season. In a game against Atlanta, Trae Young with everyone kind of rooting against him, that could be scary, right? He can go into Orlando and maybe he can try to get off and, have one of those 30, 40 point games and 15 assists or whatever the case may be. But will that be enough? Will he get enough help on the other side of on that side of the basketball, in addition to be able to stop, what Banchero and Wagner are providing on the offensive side? I think it's closer than most people are going to give it credit for, because I think it's very easy to want to just kind of turn your nose up at what Trae Young is and who he is. And while we at one point, like, he was doing really well the part of the season, was doing good in the the SoFi midseason tournament or whatever the case may be. Emirates midseason tournament. Apologies, sponsors would kill me. But we're far removed from that, right? And we've kind of forgotten that. And now Jalen Johnson has been out, and they're kind of a different team than they were kind of in December and January. But Orlando is a good matchup for them. And I think when you're thinking about it from a truly offensive versus defensive kind of approach here is what's taking place, I'm interested in this one. I think it's going to be a lot closer than some people are giving it credit for.
well, I'm going to put it like this. I think if the Orlando Magic don't want to see Ice Trae in the building, blow them out. Just blow them out. It's just what it really needs to come down to. I think that Dyson Daniels to me is a person you got to watch out for, because he's really been putting up some pretty impressive numbers over the last few weeks. And obviously, again, the loss of Jalen Johnson, you can make the argument as well too that what Jamal Mosley needs offensively, losing Jalen Suggs and his 3-point shot making ability is going to be a problem. But again, I just look at what this team could potentially do and what Mosley has been able to get from his bench. So listen, it's not like, what it's what the Memphis Grizzlies have, but Anthony Black, Da Silva, and these guys, they have come through. I think there's opportunity there. I'd like to see probably a little bit more emphasis from the Orlando Magic in playing a faster pace. I know that they don't probably want to do that if you're dealing with the Atlanta Hawks, but I just think they have able bodies, and I think it's going to be vitally important for the rest of that roster to get easy looks and easy baskets. And the Atlanta Hawks are very much capable of accommodating that, so to speak. They're not like one of the best teams defensively either. So there's opportunities there for the Orlando Magic to get some of their other role players involved to make things a little bit easier, because I do think Snyder is going to focus on shutting one of these guys down. And listen, while Banchero is a great player, right? He has his moments where he'll go on offensive droughts. Wagner as well too. So it'll be interesting with this particular matchup, because I do think it's going to come down to which role players are going to have that breakout game to help augment what's going on with the star players.
Yeah, I mean, Atlanta, they're going to try to push the pace. They're one of the, I think, top 6 teams in fast break points, this season. What I'm interested in is what they do on the other side of the basketball, as you alluded to. Does Dyson Daniels take the Wagner situation or the Banchero situation, and then who's left to guard whoever's left, out of that in a real meaningful way? I think it's probably Dyson Daniels on Wagner, and then Okongwu trying to do his best job on Banchero, trying to stay in front of him. Well, I just don't think Okongwu is that fleet of foot, really. And I think they're going to have to send some doubles. But then you're forcing Banchero to be a playmaker in that situation and find open guys. I think you send 2 at him on a regular basis and see what he does with it from there, and let see if Orlando guys can hit shots. What are you doing? What's up, Anthony Black? You know what I mean? KCP, yes, you're known for being a shooter, but you've had your woes this year. I'd rather go down like that if I'm Atlanta, as opposed to letting Banchero and Wagner, drive and mid-range me to death. I'm making all those other guys beat me if I'm Atlanta.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I bet you, though, Snyder is probably looking at the owner, the GM of Atlanta, saying, "The hell you moved DeAndre Hunter for? Damn you." This has been a perfect game for DeAndre Hunter to do some things, man.
Well, I mean, it's a lot
I'd
of
actually
things, right? Because
love
if they
that
still have
matchup
Jalen
against
Johnson, maybe
Buffalo.
they're not even in this situation. But if they are, obviously that's somebody else they can go to, and then another offensive weapon that they'd have in their side. Listen, let's not poo-poo the aspect of what Karis LeVert has been able to do offensively. Now, he's not going to come here and stop anybody, I think, as you're alluding to, but the combination, of Niang and LeVert has been pretty solid, especially from an
And
offensive
they could very
standpoint and
much
some
be an
play
X factor.
play creation.
They could be very much an X factor in this
Sure.
in scenario. All right, Shaw. So very quickly, let's run through the tape, right? Um, who is going to have a second bite at the apple per se? I think you had spoken to the fact that the Kings were going to outlast the Mavericks, and I think you were saying that the Grizzlies, right, or the Warriors. I think you said
I
the
didn't
Grizzlies.
really give a prediction there, but I will now. I will say I'm going to lead on the brilliance of Steph and Jimmy Butler at home. In Golden State to take out Memphis, leaving Memphis and Sacramento to battle it out for what would be the 8th seed. And I'll just preempt that there. And I think Memphis does ultimately get in
Okay.
as the 8th seed. Your comments or thoughts on how that may shake out?
I like it. I want to go. I want to go Grizzlies taking out the. Actually, I'm going to do that. I think
I love it.
ultimately, it's going to come down to where the Kings are. Damn it, we're going to see the damn Warriors again. The Warriors will figure out a way to get into the playoff situation, but I think the Grizzlies take out the Warriors. There's just I don't know, man. There's something I'm just not trusting about the Golden State Warriors, man. It's
Hey.
just an inkling with me.
I think you could be right, especially if Jimmy is banged up. Like if he's not right by Tuesday or whenever it is they ultimately play, then yeah, that could be extremely problematic for them. They shouldn't be here. Like they had that game, they should have beat the Clippers, but they didn't.
Exactly. That was my perspective. All right, and then quickly, Bulls Heat. I think you said it's going to be Heat, right? And then Magic Hawks. I think you said that the Magic figure out a way. So
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm leaning. So I'm gonna take the Heat over the Bulls. I'm gonna take the Magic over the Hawks, and then I'm gonna take the Hawks over the Heat.
yeah, I like the Magic over the Heat. I just don't think that there's enough bodies that Spoelstra can throw. And I think when you're playing against really good defensive teams, as much as I want this to be about a Tyler Hero coming out party, I only meant that for the game against the Bulls. Because I don't know where
You got Atlanta beating Orlando, and Orlando playing Miami.
No. I have I'm sorry. I'm sorry, my bad. I have the Magic beating the Hawks, right?
Yep.
But then I have the Hawks outlasting the Heat.
Miami.
Yeah, I just think from a talent perspective, I think the Hawks will just figure out a way to just beat the Heat. They may expend a little bit too much energy to get themselves in this position and may not have enough in the tank to deal with a very heady Hawks team, or maybe even a very angry Hawks team, depending on how bad the Magic might be.
Okay.
That
Well,
work for
we're
you?
aligned there, at least in the Eastern Conference. West, we have a little bit of flip flopping. The playing tournament is going to be live, brother. I cannot wait to see. Hope everybody is healthy, to be able to give us the best basketball.
Absolutely. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, time for us to get into the playoff situations. We're talking about the 4-5 and the 3-6 seeded matchups that will be taking place in the Eastern Western Conferences, respectively. You don't want to miss out here on the Baseline. We're back. Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Time now to get right into it, baby. Playoffs. Time for us to talk playoffs, man. Got some really, really good, interesting matchups taking place. Let's start with the 4-5 seeds in the East, in the Western and the Eastern conferences, respectively. We have the 4-seeded Denver Nuggets. They will play host for the Los Angeles Clippers. And the Los Angeles Clippers found themselves in the enjoyable situation after winning that last game of the regular season, putting the Warriors in their play-in situation. They wind up traveling to Denver to take on Jokic and the Denver Nuggets. What are we making about this matchup? Listen, man, there's a lot of buzz about the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, people are like, don't sleep on the Clippers. This is probably going to be the most dangerous team that's going to be, that's entered into the playoff situation. It would have been better to see them in the play-in situation.
Yeah.
What are we talking about here? Or should we continue to lean back on the fact that, hey, the Nuggets are the Nuggets. They will again figure out a way to outwill and outlast and be right in the throes of being in the conference semifinal round situation, regardless of whoever they're going to play in the first round.
Uh I think we have a couple of contenders for probably some of the best matchups in the first round. And this is one of those series that I think could be like, yo, watch out. It could be an absolute just juggernaut of a slugfest. This Clippers team has really kind of come along. Ty Lue has just been exactly who we know him to be, one of the better coaches in the NBA. I put on X earlier, during the Warriors game, I was like, I need my Zubac guy to win something. Defensive player of the year or most improved, something, because he is absolutely hooping for this Clippers team. Harden has unlocked the best version of Zoo. Kawhi is obviously back to the Kawhi levels that we've known him to be, getting his shot, looking, almost, dare I say, bouncy, off on the dribble, and, still playing the passing lanes, the sleuth that he is. This Clippers team is extremely dangerous. And I think with the changes going on in Denver, not that I would ever doubt the best player in basketball in Nikola Jokic, I'm just concerned about their ability to mend. While they have won 3 straight since firing Michael Malone, the playoffs are going to be a lot different than what we've seen here in the final 3 games of the regular season. While Jamal Murray is a killer, Michael Porter Jr., all those guys have the experience. It gives me a little bit of pause based on how they close out the season and with all the turmoil surrounding their front office.
I've said this before and I'll say this again. Will the real Michael Porter please stand up? If there's ever an opportunity for Michael Porter Jr. to be an X factor, for the number of times that I've yelped about this all over every time we do a podcast, this is again another chance and another opportunity for him to be so. Right now, you can't change his game. His game is what it is. He's not someone that truly takes advantage of smaller players because he loves to just shoot the basketball. But he has got to figure out a way where his size has to have some kind of an impact in the game and not just be predicated on the hot and cold shooting that typically is exhibited. Because if he's cold, it's a wrap. It's like having really one less man on the basketball court because he doesn't do all of the other things that are necessary for what his height size actually gives you. And in a situation like this, Shaw, against the Los Angeles Clippers, which they're a relatively small team in comparison to the Denver Nuggets, but it can't only be on Jokic to be the big, right? It can't just only be on what he does and how he does things, right? And so I feel like this is, again, an opportunity where the Denver front court has a chance to kind of flex their muscles and exhibit a different style of basketball that could actually push the Los Angeles Clippers back. But to your point, if Zubac is that guy, he's going to cause problems for Nikola Jokic. He doesn't necessarily have to stop Jokic, but what I'm saying is he's going to force Jokic to do more than even what's necessary that he's already been doing. And there just comes a point where what is the point of the other guys that you've got on that roster and what you have them out there for if they're not going to be the kind of players that are needed for them to get past a series like this against the Los Angeles Clippers? And to your point, Shaw, obviously you're betting on Tyronn Lue to have the right roster, to put the right pieces in place, to force a rookie coach in a playoff situation to make those kind of adjustments. Where are we seeing that scenario play itself out to the advantage of the Denver Nuggets?
Yeah, I mean, I think the aspect for the Nuggets is that the rest of their guys are all veteran guys and championship laden. So can they overcome like whatever deficiencies, the new coach has in this situation to ultimately match the wits of another veteran team on the other side in the LA Clippers? Michael Porter Jr. still he had a good season numbers wise, 18-7, shot over 50%, almost 40% from 3. And I think sometimes it feels like, well, did he do something? But in some ways, it's the aspect of those numbers they still add up. Like they're still there. And while the impact may not be as verbose as maybe some of us would hope, like where would they be without that 18-7 and with those levels of efficiency? He's played really good basketball. In addition to Aaron Gordon shooting the best 3-point percentage he's ever shot. So I like Denver's, obviously front five with Christian Braun as well too. And then I think then you're like just dubious about what's happening on the bench, obviously with Westbrook and some others, DeAndre Jordan and others kind of coming into this. The Nuggets are going to be extremely, extremely top heavy, and those guys are going to play, 38 to 45 minutes a night, in this tough series against the Clippers. But on the other side of it, with Harden, with Kawhi, with Norman Powell, Denver's Achilles heel has been the defense. And all of those guys can score the basketball. Zoo is going to sit in the dunker spot, wait for lobs or catch on the roll or get offensive rebounds and putbacks. I think the Clippers pose a huge problem for Denver in Denver's inability to stop all the Clippers that can ultimately get off.
Yeah, well, listen, my final thought on this is the Clippers need to get to the free throw line. And they've got the able bodies to be able to do it, right? But they've got to want to get to the free throw line. If they just start getting perimeter happy, listen, like we're watching just in this game against the Golden State Warriors, right? Chris Dunn was on a heater. And I love that. I love seeing this guy finally find a place where he actually can belong. He can actually be an X factor in this situation. But it means nothing if the LA Clippers are not going to make the Denver Nuggets pay. If you allow the Denver Nuggets to be who they are and play the way that they want to play, the Clippers are not going to win this series. So they ultimately have an advantage by forcing the Denver Nuggets, because the Denver Nuggets have been a very less disciplined defensive team since they won the championship. Mm-hmm. And it's not because Jokic, is a liability. Actually, Jokic's defensive numbers have improved since they've won the championship. He's literally one of the few people that has actually improved on that aspect of the basketball where everyone else has taken a step back. So even as good as the numbers are for Michael Porter Jr., even as good as the numbers probably are for the rest, Christian Braun and all those guys, offensively, defensively, that team has taken a step back. The Clippers have to make the Denver Nuggets pay for their lack of defensive discipline by getting those guys in foul trouble. And if the Clippers do that, they will find an easiest path forward for them to advance in this series.
Well said, brother. Well said. What we got next?
All right. What are your predictions?
7 games, and I'm going to lean against my better judgment. I'm going to lean Clippers. While I'm still concerned about the health of Kawhi, I want to stand on my business in general in terms of like my non-disbelief. Things have looked different, and I think for all the reasons you just laid out in terms of Denver's even defense, I'm concerned about their ability to defend in this series throughout. I think it's going to be a very, very good series, 7 games, but I'm going to lean LA Clippers.
If it goes 7, I go Nuggets. If it goes 5 or 6, I got Clippers.
All right.
There you go. All right, let's go ahead and focus our attention to the Eastern Conference 4-5 matchup. And that's going to be between the Indiana Pacers and the Milwaukee Bucks. The Indiana Pacers figured out a way for them to be the hosts against the Milwaukee Bucks. And this one, again, is an intriguing matchup. I mean, I'm old school. I look at this as more of being a rivalry, right? These teams do not like each other. And it's apropos because I want to see some bite in this first rounds of the playoffs. And I like the idea of seeing what this Milwaukee Bucks team can really do, because I don't think people are giving the respect due for the Indiana Pacers. I think people still look at them as a paper team, so to speak, because of what they achieved last year. But I think this is a great platform that if people don't want to buy into how dangerous the Indiana Pacers can truly be, run over the Milwaukee Bucks and see what people are going to say about them now.
I mean, I agree with that. And the Indiana Pacers had an opportunity to catch the Knicks, really. They were 1 game behind them and could have ended up being the 3 seed. So they've really turned things around since their struggles to begin the year, I was dubious on them to begin the year and kind of throughout. I still don't believe them. I still don't think this is a great and amazing basketball team. I'm just not there. And while I respect what Tyrese Halliburton brings as a game manager and what he can do to kind of get his guys open, I just feel like they're going to struggle when it matters most to defend. Doc Rivers, for all his flaws, has figured things out for Milwaukee. They end the season, I think, on an 8-game winning streak. Yes, the schedule was kind to them, in that, and we saw that a couple times for the Bucks. They stacked up a lot of their wins against some of the lesser tiers of the NBA. But you need to win the games that you're supposed to win, and you can only beat who's in front of you. But I do think they figured out a little something here with their current rotation, even without Dame, who was not expected to be back here in this first round. And I think, the brilliance of Giannis, coupled by what Brook Lopez is doing, and even guys like like Connaughton and Kevin Porter Jr. just contributing in another way, in another level. This Bucks team is a lot more dangerous than I think we were thinking about them, at the midpoint of the season, where especially when they were just looked so much more mortal with Dame and Giannis in tow. There's a lot of pressure off this Bucks team because Dame is not there. So they've been playing a lot more free with a lot less expectations, and that has resulted in W's. And I think that could be problematic for this Indiana team who's riding pretty high themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. You don't believe in the Indiana Pacers. I don't know if I believe in the Milwaukee Bucks as heavily. Like there's just something that is missing about what I'm seeing from this team and the inconsistency. And I don't know if it's more about not the players, but more about the coaching. Maybe I'm just getting kind of tired of Doc Rivers and how he can't hold this momentum that the team typically has, because when they come off of their high, when they lose badly. They really lose badly. That kind of fluctuation just doesn't cut it for me. You're either really good or you're not really good. You know what I'm saying? And I understand you don't have Damian Lillard, but at the same time, Shaw, I would have been saying the same thing even if they did have Damian Lillard, because that's just what happens with the Milwaukee Bucks. We were talking about them from the beginning of the year. If they're that team, and I know a lot of people are not talking about them. We've even had guests on who have spoken about the fact that this could be the year that people are not speaking about the Bucks, which makes them the type of team that should make them dangerous. To me, this is the kind of matchup, this is the kind of series that I think exposes either we see the ultimate dominance of the Milwaukee Bucks team and people buying into how dangerous they can be throughout this playoff run, or we actually are looking at the demise of what is arguably one of the more disappointing stretches of runs when you have a good basketball team like the Milwaukee Bucks, going all the way back to what happened to Budenholzer. So to me, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, you need to look at this as you need to play like this is your championship series ultimately. One, because it's the Indiana Pacers. Two, because it's the Indiana Pacers. Like, there's no excuse for why Giannis does not go out there and ultimately dominate. Because to me, this just comes down to, if you are the Milwaukee Bucks, you cannot get knocked out of the first round, especially against the Indiana Pacers.
Well, I agree. And we'll see now what Kyle Kuzma is also made of. This is a great opportunity for him, to play for at least playoff level basketball. I won't say championship level, but at least playoff level basketball. And we haven't seen this from him in a minute. So is he up to the task? Bobby Portis coming back is no small thing, from, with the drug suspension that he had, and he's been back and played relatively well in this time as well. So, between that and what they've been able to get out of AJ Green on the perimeter, this Milwaukee Bucks team, again, they're a little different. They're different than we expected them to be, but I think that makes them maybe even a little bit more dangerous to an Indiana Pacers team who while they have also been disrespected, they have a lot of confidence that I think might be slightly misplaced against this Bucks team. But we'll see what happens here, in this 4-5 matchup.
Do you think Doc Rivers unleashes Kyle Kuzma?
I hope not. Unleashing Kyle Kuzma, I don't think is good for anybody. I think he's got to be able to be in a space where he's doing well on catch and shoot opportunities, especially on drives from Giannis. So he's got to be able to knock down that perimeter jumper, but then also be able to put it on the floor. Same thing, 1 or 2 dribbles, and then be able to, do a pull up or finish, with a layup or maybe even over somebody at time. We need to see some level of aggression from Kuzma, but not unleashing him where you're featuring him in any real way. He has to be ready, kind of as that auxiliary piece to what Milwaukee is doing, especially if Lopez is going to camp out. Kuzma needs to be more of a cutter and a slasher and a plus rebounder on the defensive side of the basketball.
All right. So what are your predictions? Who's coming out in this series?
I'm going to stand on my business again. I just can't get there on Indiana. I'm going to pick the Bucks to upset the Pacers in 6.
I got Pacers taking out the Bucks in 6.
Fair. I mean, that's the right pick. That's the right pick. I'm just going with my heart and, just how I felt about Indiana kind of all season. I will probably pick against them in every single series until they are ultimately eliminated.
I hear you. I hear you. I just felt like the Ubuntu was singing to you a lot more. Your belief. You're tuned to the Baseline. Callie Ward Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, let's talk them 3-6 seeding matchups that's going to take place in the Eastern Western Conference, respectively. You don't want to miss it here on the Baseline. We're back, Lee Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and time for us to go into the 3-6 matchups in the West and the Eastern Conference, respectively. Let's talk 3-6. The Los Angeles Lakers will play host to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm licking my chops on this one, man. I am liking this, man. There's some unfinished business. So now I'm actually happy that Luka Dončić is playing with the Los Angeles Lakers, because I want to see Anthony Edwards and Luka Dončić going at it. And I know there's a whole lot more to this series and the matchups that are going on, but you cannot tell me that Anthony Edwards has this circle on his calendar that if they got to that 6th seed and have to play the Lakers, that he is not ready to put Luka Dončić on in that spin cycle and actually put the Minnesota Timberwolves in that conversation of, hey, don't get it twisted. This wasn't an afterthought of what we did last year. We're here to close the deal. Like we're gonna do what we need to do. And if it's at the expense of taking out Luka and the Lakers, so be it.
It's going to be a fun series. Anthony Edwards has an opportunity to, for the second year in a row, take out like a legend. Taking out KD last year, in the first round in a sweep, ironically, was obviously the highlight of his career. Ultimately losing, though, to Luka in the conference finals. Now he has to go against LeBron and Luka again too, where it'd be a great opportunity to beat another luminary in LeBron and maybe exercise some demons against Luka, from last season. The problem here is that he doesn't have the requisite running mate offensively, in essence, to be able to keep up with the Lakers. And the Lakers are a great defensive team as of late in the latter part of the season. And everybody, like literally everybody said it, is because they try hard. Literally, they effort the hell out of the thing on the defensive side, and they just try hard and they're communicating. And they're going to be able to do that against this Minnesota team. I'm concerned about their ability to match that defensive intensity, but more so the offensive side of the basketball. Where do they get points from? If Finney Smith and Vanderbilt and guys are like swarming and swamping, Anthony Edwards, now you're relying on Julius Randle to be, a playmaker and a scorer, and or Rudy Gobert to catch some things off some lobs. I think that when you talk about X factors, this is going to be a big Naz Reid series, because he's going to have to provide some offensive punch for them that might be lacking from other places.
So you're looking at this as saying the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to have to outscore the Los Angeles Lakers. Like, in other words, they got to outplay the Los Angeles Lakers defensively.
Yeah, I mean, and Minnesota has finished, I think, top 10 in both, right? So they're 5th or 6th defensively, and they're like 8th or 9th, I think, offensively. So in theory, that works. But again, we know what it is when the bolts tighten up here in the playoffs. How are they going to really truly manufacture the offense in a way that I think is requisite when you need to keep up what LeBron and Luka are doing? Not just from a scoring side from those two, but from the playmaking side. Like, this, the genius that they create to make other guys better in a way that I think Minnesota is going to struggle to keep pace with. When Jackson Hayes is all of a sudden catching lobs and he's getting 12 to 15 points a game, like, well, dang, it's Jackson Hayes, but you can't stop it because you have to worry about the threat of LeBron and Luke on a regular basis, each and every possession. And the fact that they can always have one of those guys out there is a luxury no other team really has in terms of that offensive brilliance and genius. So where Minnesota is going to struggle is Anthony Edwards is going to truly have to play both sides of the basketball. And yeah, maybe he can air quote lock up Luka per se and make Luka more of a passer as opposed to the scorer, but Ant still has to score on the other side of the basketball. And that's where I think that just going to probably wear him down, unless you get something crazy from Naz Reid or Nickeil Alexander-Walker or something like that, who goes off offensively throughout the course of the series.
Yeah, and this is where that trade has a very interesting appeal, right? At the beginning of this year, when they moved Karl Anthony Towns and they got back Julius Randle. Here's the thing. If you had told me that getting Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo, was not going to help the Minnesota Timberwolves in a series like this, I would have told you, don't make this deal happen or whatever, because the chemistry that Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns had, especially given the run that they had last year, would be so important for a type of run like this in this particular first round of the playoffs. But I'm going to lean into what you were just talking about before, Shaw. This really comes down to these guys doing what they do more offensively than what you're asking these guys to give you defensively against the Los Angeles Lakers. Julius Randle has to figure out a way to score that basketball. Dante DiVincenzo has to figure out a way to get his 3-ball shot to fall. They have to have an impact. I know you were mentioning Naz Reid as well too. My thing is that I feel like Anthony Edwards' imprint is not going to be on what he does offensively, but to your point, what he does defensively to flip the script, so to speak, on Luka Dončić, on Gabe Vincent, on Austin Reeves, basically creating havoc for those guys. If these guys are just basically going to go out there and just make their shots and jack up, 3-point shots from halfway point and just, with no resistance or whatever the case may be, to your point, I don't see the Minnesota Timberwolves coming out of this series. But part of that, though, still comes down to leaning on the strengths of what you got these other guys for, meaning Julius Randle has to make the Lakers front court pay, punish them down in the paint. Dante DiVincenzo, extend the floor, give more opportunities for Gobert and for Julius Randle, more opportunities for Naz Reid, right? Open up the Anthony Edwards, and this was my last point about this real quick. Anthony Edwards has fallen in love with the 3-point shot a lot this season, right? I don't know it's to the detriment, but we're going to find out in this particular series, because if he's going to just basically back off and just shoot threes, he is basically conceding. He's giving the Lakers a gift, essentially. He has got to be the aggressive Anthony Edwards that we saw last year that was basically putting the opposition in foul trouble every game in the series, which is what gave them the confidence to push them all the way to the Western Conference Finals.
I mean, he hit over 300 threes on basically 40% this year. So, I mean, yes, the volume is up, but the efficiency is there. And, I think that's been able to save him from some of the physical demands, going into the paint and getting hacked and, taking all those tumbles and falls. It's interesting you brought up, tangentially, in this series, you talked about Austin Reeves. Like, Austin Reeves is not, just some guy out here. Like, he's a major factor of what's going on here. And I think that's just another weapon for the Clippers. And that's where I'm just I'm concerned about Minnesota's ability to defend all of those guys while producing on the other side as well, too.
You said Clippers. You meant the Lakers, right?
The Lakers, yes.
Oh,
so
okay.
Then with Randle in that, it's like, all right, Randle's not this great post-up guy, but does he try to play some bully ball in this situation? And then what does McDaniels ultimately do? Can he give them anything offensively? Because he's got to basically sell out defensively, but can he do anything when he's on the other side of the basketball, or do they just leave him open? I think it's a tough series for Minnesota, despite what their output has been throughout the season offensively, being a top 10 offense. I just don't know if that's going to translate in the same way here against a Lakers team that is really ready and playing some of their best basketball, especially on the defense side of the basketball.
All right, what's your prediction?
I won't Shannon Sharp this, whatever the case may be, but I'll say Lakers in 6 instead of Lakers in
5. All right, I'm gonna say Lakers in 7. I think the Minnesota Timberwolves give them a run for their money. But I think in the end, I just think too much LeBron, too much Reeves, too much Dončić. How about that? That work?
I agree. Yeah, DiVincenzo can be something in this series on the other side for Minnesota too. Like, there's just a lot of people who could be X factors, but a lot of people we're not sure are going to be X factors. And I think you just go with the brilliance of what the Lakers have, especially with the way Austin Reeves has been playing alongside Luka and LeBron as well.
I just think the swing and miss, on where you play the percentages with the Minnesota Timberwolves is just too great.
Yeah,
not like last year. It's just too extreme for me to say that I can.
I get it.
Yeah, they literally would have to like shock the crap out of the Los Angeles Lakers to give me any confidence they're going to wind up winning this particular series. Like that's just my perspective.
Yep.
All right, Shaw. So let's finally talk about the last 3-6 matchup, and that's in the Eastern Conference, and that's going to be between the New York Knicks and the Detroit Pistons. Look, man, I'm already on a high with what we've seen, what the Detroit Pistons have been able to do. First team in NBA history to basically go from a 14-win to a 45-win season or 44-win season, to triplicate their win total. Unheard of. That makes them about as dangerous as a team you're going to probably see in this first round of the NBA playoffs. And if I am the New York Knicks, yes, I would be very concerned about this situation, because nothing from what we've seen from the New York Knicks throughout the course of this year, while it's a 51 season, is a successful season. Nothing is giving you this confidence that they're legitimately ready to make a true run to the Eastern Conference Finals. And it would just be devastating for them to get taken out in the first round by this team that JB Bickerstaff has assembled. But let's not make light of the fact that they are for real and they definitely should not be slept on.
Yeah, I think when it comes to the lower seeded teams, like truly, because I think the 4 or 5 is about as even as you can really get, right? So I think of the lower seeded teams, this might be one of the more popular picks. The Pistons are, until I guess Golden State probably ends up in a matchup against the Rockets or whatever the case may be. But
Right.
this Detroit Pistons team has surprised, and I think in some ways the Knicks team has somewhat underwhelmed despite winning the 50 games, as you alluded to. They've looked, pretty average, especially since the Brunson injury, but Brunson is back. And he's playing, good basketball. He's playing the level of basketball you would expect him to. I think you always concern yourself with New York's ability to, or inability to, have a certain level of depth. And will they wear themselves out over the course of a 7-game series against a team that can be physical in Detroit? JB's like, listen, we're going to defend here, right? They got them into, in the top 15 defensively, which is something that a lot of people wouldn't have expected from this Detroit team going into the regular season. And then offensively, they're actually they're actually 10th in defense, right? Offensively, they're still middle of the pack, if you will, but you have somebody who can be a closer in Cade Cunningham. And I think nothing about the Knicks is like what it was in the beginning, where their offense was just stellar for whatever reason. And I didn't believe those raps either in the beginning. I was like, it seemed like an anomaly, but they were getting, shooting 3-point percentage well. Towns and Brunson were playing so super efficiently. But I haven't seen some of that same levels, and I just don't believe they're that level of an offensive juggernaut. And I think, if in a one-on-one battle, Cade versus Jalen Brunson, I think it can be pretty even. Where you lean towards the Knicks is just that they've been here before. The Pistons have not. Rather, Karl Anthony Towns is fresh off a conference finals run. Brunson and company made it to the semis last year. Like, they know what it is to be in the throes of this, where the Pistons teams does not. And I think that's where Knicks have the ultimate edge, despite not being able to have the same level of depth that the Detroit Pistons do.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough situation for the Detroit Pistons because you've got a lot of players who've just not been in this space before. And we've seen, especially as successful as the Detroit Pistons have been over the last couple of weeks, they've had their inconsistencies in their ability to score the basketball.
Let me
And
hold on. Let me interject from this lane, because I think what you brought up is an excellent point. How much do you feel Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, and even Tim Hardaway Jr., the true veterans on this, guys who have playoff experience, how much do you think they can help bolster what the Pistons lack, in terms of that playoff integrity?
where they can help is not something that is tangible on scoring the basketball as much as what they need to do in order to keep either within relative distance or to help elevate the rest of the players. Maybe not so much Malik Beasley. I think Malik Beasley has a good opportunity for him to score the way that he has been scoring. I mean, it's why he's been in the conversations for sixth man of the year. But him, Cade Cunningham, those two guys can actually be a problem for the New York Knicks, especially for what they do defensively. Guys like Tobias Harris, again, this is these are when I talk about coming out moments, this is what I'm talking about. You would think that you can speak with confidence. A guy like Tobias Harris can come out here and he can actually, give you 15, 16 points for a team like this. It has a significant weight on, changing the momentum of a series like this, like actually putting the Pistons in a position to win games like that. I'm looking at it more of keeping the rest of the other upside talent and possible matchups that JB Bickerstaff may be able to utilize and play against the New York Knicks, maybe force them into playing nervous basketball, force them to making silly fouls and silly turnovers and things of that nature. If these guys can have a veteran presence in calming the rookies down, so to speak, so that they understand at this moment, I think that will have more of an impact than worrying about whether or not these guys are going to come in and score points and stuff like that. Because I've just seen way too many times where the Tim Hardaway Juniors and the Tobias Harrises have not really shown up in that kind of way. And it's not like they're not going to be put in a position to do so, but I think they'll be better suited to help add on helping the Jalen Durans and those guys to play within themselves and to not cause mistakes that exacerbates the situation, especially if you're in striking distance against a team like the New York Knicks.
Well, one thing the Pistons will have going for them is that they have, I think, two, as I think as Bill Simmons says, two of the irrational confidence guys on their team. And that'll be Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley. Those guys will not be afraid to take shots. Now, whether or not they're successful, in big game shots and opportunities, that will remain to be seen. But I think there's something about even having the guy alongside Cade, obviously, who would obviously be the primary option there. But if he's isolated or he's isolated, I think both of those guys will be ready and capable to make shots, especially in the hostile environment of New York City.
But you know what this is going to come down to, Shaw? This is going to come down to, does Cade Cunningham really believe in and rely on those guys? And I think he does. And I think if you are Tim Hardaway Jr. and you want to put Malik Beasley in that conversation, you can, albeit I feel Cade is more confident in Malik Beasley than I think maybe we're discussing in the factors of this. Yeah. But I want to see where Cade Cunningham's confidence in Tim Hardaway Jr. lends itself to Tim Hardaway Jr. coming up big for him, right? Like making those shots, because Cade is putting him in the best position possible for him to make those shots. And I think that to me is where part of that kind of that mindset to me, or what we're talking about, is coming from. Because I think Cade Cunningham will have his chances and he's going to have an impact. I don't think he's going to be scared of the moment, so to speak, or he's going to play, horrible basketball like we've seen some star players in their first rounds, or, when they put a team in this position to do what they've accomplished this year. But I do think that the confidence of Cade and the other players, they have to step up and make it count when Cade puts him in that position, because ultimately the Knicks are going to be honing in on him and forcing him to try to do too much to make it easier for them to win the series.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see Thibs, just isolate and ice Cade a lot, but throw OG Anunoby and Bridges at him on a regular basis, and to continue to give him different looks, and that could ultimately be frustrating, where other Pistons do have to truly step up to win this for them, and then that is your Tobias Harris's, your Malik Beasley's, and Tim Hardaway Jr.'s. But let's not forget about Dennis Schroeder as well, too. He's got some great playoff acumen. He's been helpful. I mean, you laugh, but he's been very helpful for this Detroit Pistons team. He was kind of a throw-in to me, or just, he got moved in and moved again and just kind of ended up in Detroit. But by no small thing has he been impactful. So, he could be out there and impact the series. But, on the flip side of it, I think with Tibbs' ability to throw Bridges and Anunoby at things in the way that I think that the Pistons could potentially struggle with, Towns can keep Durant away from the rim, where he's ultimately most impactful. But Towns' ability to shoot the three on a regular basis and even dribble and drive somewhat effectively, I think gives the Knicks a lot more edge in this, despite the Pistons being a very, very popular pick with all the success that they've had this year.
All right. So basically you're saying Knicks in.
Yeah, I'm going to say Knicks in 6. I mean, my heart is with Detroit in this one. I'd love to see them be able to do it, or whatever the case may be. Nothing against New York in this case. I just like the story of Detroit. But I got to go with what history has taught me, in terms of, you got to take your licks. You get in here, you got to understand what it is a little bit, and you don't usually get success your first go at this. So I'm going to pick the Knicks in 6.
Yeah, I'm taking the Knicks in 6 as well too. I just think that the Knicks just have just a better all-around team. And the person that we're not talking about that I think is going to have a serious impact on the way that this game gets played is Josh Hart. I just think that his all-around game is going to cause problems for the Detroit Pistons. And I guess, like, when I look at teams like this, man, it's more than just what the score reflects. It's the other intangible things that have to be looked at in a series like this: rebounds, steals, defensive assignments and abilities and things of that nature. I just feel like if Josh Hart continues to be that kind of presence, he will have an imprint to take the load off of that responsibility that Jalen Brunson, I think, is going to need for the next series and the next matchup ultimately. And so that's what it comes down to. Can the New York Knicks basically get through this series without putting a lot of the onus and pressure on their star players to come? Like, this is a great opportunity for Mikal Bridges. This is a great opportunity for OG Anunoby. This is a great opportunity for them to start finding their rhythm. And I'm not saying at the expense of the Pistons, because I think the Pistons are going to make it tough for this Knicks team no matter how you slice it. But this is a great opportunity that if you're ever going to have any kind of confidence about this roster and the New York Knicks being serious against the likes of the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Boston Celtics, whoever, they have to find their rhythm in this series. And I'm just curious to see whether or not, when it's all said and done and the Knicks advance, what version of those guys are going to be like going into the next round as well too.
Yeah, I think great points, right? So if they get battered and bruised by Detroit Pistons team, then presumably they face the Boston in the next round, presumably so, and then, that's something that they've obviously struggled with through the course of this regular season, and previous to that. So what lessons have they learned and will they be able to take out of the series with Detroit that can ultimately propel them to be competitive in what they hope will be a semifinals matchup? So a lot. We've discussed a lot here, but I'm excited about these playoffs. My luster has not, waned in any way. I feel like we're going to get some really great basketball through the course of this playoff run from a bunch of different teams, and maybe some heroes we haven't discussed will ultimately emerge too, which will give us some more conversational pieces in future episodes of the Baseline.
Well spoken, brother, man. This extended version of our show, let it not be said, man. We covered a lot of ground, but man, it's not without us being able to recognize some great matchups that are going to be taking place in the play-in and ultimately the first round of the playoffs, man. And this is exciting stuff per usual.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. Once again, man, we appreciate everybody hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Enjoy the third chapter of the 2025-2026 NBA season. It's play-in playoff time, baby. Let's rock out. Callie, Warren, Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. We appreciate you guys. You know we do. We'll catch up with you next time.